The State of the State address is the governor's opportunity to set her agenda and establish the tone for the legislative session. The governor's speech drew quick reactions from legislative leaders and questions from state agencies, which could see major changes in their operations.
The Chief Executive, Governor Mary Fallin.
It was Mary Fallon's fourth time as governor to deliver a State of the State address to the legislature. Just as she has the past 2 years, the governor is again asking lawmakers to cut the state's top income tax rate.
Let's take this opportunity to show the country that lower taxes and limited government do work. We believe in them for a reason. The Oklahoma way, not the Washington way, is the best way to support economic growth and help the middle class Oklahomans and Americans.
The governor's proposed fiscal year 2015 budget includes appropriations of $7.02 billion. That's almost $92 million less than the current fiscal year's budget. And the governor's projections show reducing the top income tax rate by 0.25% would cost the state just over $47 million in the first half year, another $77 million in the first full fiscal year. Senate Minority Leader Sean Burridge questions the math, arguing the tax cut plan will actually take up to $125 million out of next year's budget.
You compound that with the fact that we know we're down at least $171 million this year. That's almost $300 million you're talking out of the state budget. That, to me, is fiscally irresponsible.
Oklahoma Policy Institute Executive Director David Blatt says the governor's proposal takes a bad situation and makes it worse, arguing Oklahoma still hasn't recovered from the last economic downturn.
We're over $500 million behind where we were 5 years ago when you adjust for inflation. What really concerns us is that we are going to end up even deeper in a hole and falling even further behind in our efforts to provide adequate funding for schools, for infrastructure, for public safety, and for health care.
Dave Bond with OCPA Impact counters that cutting the top tax rate would stimulate economic growth, eventually resulting in more revenue.
Anytime a state or a nation reduces that penalty on work, you're encouraging the private sector to be more productive, to take more risk, to create more jobs. That tends to spur capital growth, bringing in capital from other states and other parts of the country, bringing in new jobs, bringing in new taxpayers. That leads to increased tax revenues.
To offset losses from the tax cut and reduce revenues available for appropriation, the governor is calling for a 5% reduction in the budgets of most state agencies.
Those cuts are necessary. For decades, policymakers have skimmed off the top of our general revenue fund, apportioning money to programs supporting education, road and bridge construction, and other priorities. Over time, that has reduced the general fund, leaving the legislature less money to appropriate.
State Finance Secretary Preston Dorflinger calls the budget conservative, but insists it's not a crisis. Dorflinger maintains most agencies still have room to tighten their belts.
There's more than enough money laying around government to keep the ship sailing. If agencies find other funds to offset a cut, kudos to them. If they can't handle a cut as small as 5%, they've got issues.
Dorflinger says part of the shortfall could be made up by tapping state revolving funds, which agencies maintain to conduct various items of state business.
The 5-year average is $830 million. Again, $830 million. That's nearly 12% of the whole state budget sitting in agency accounts each year. It's a fat stack of cash.
The budget also calls for the Oklahoma Arts Council, the Oklahoma Historical Society, the J.M. Davis Memorial Commission, the Will Rogers Memorial Commission, and the Oklahoma Scenic Rivers Commission to be rolled into the Department of Tourism.
I think this is an opportunity to realize efficiencies within those agencies or commissions, but yet still allow them to fulfill their individual missions.
Arts Council Executive Director Amber Sharples disagrees, arguing consolidation would result in a loss of more than $1 million from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Mid-America Arts Alliance, and put an additional $4 million in public funding at risk.
We're concerned, obviously, with those kind of significant funding losses for our state, which directly impact our economy. We also see it as a loss of direct budget accountability to the legislature if we are a subdivision under the Department of Tourism.
Historical Society Executive Director Bob Blackburn is also concerned about the impact consolidation would have on the Society's future projects.
How will this affect those? It's not as simple as just saying let's consolidate and find savings. Where are the savings? What programs will be eliminated? How will we reach out and maintain the progress we've made?
While the budgets of most state agencies would be cut, a handful would get an increase. The governor is seeking an additional $5 million for the Department of Public Safety to provide pay raises for troopers.
The $5 million is really going to be huge for us. It's going to allow us to compete, and it's going to allow us to keep the people that we want to keep.
Public Safety Commissioner Michael Thompson says the Highway Patrol has been struggling with a shortage of troopers, so the proposed boost comes just in time.
This really helps us serve the state of Oklahoma. When you have 780 troopers, and such a large percentage of them are thinking about leaving, it makes it really tough. So we're really excited about the chance to do more for Oklahoma.
One issue the governor did not address in her speech was a tax credit for oil and gas producers. The legislature is considering whether to extend the incentive for horizontal drilling that lowers the gross production tax rate from 7 to 1%.
Our goal has always been never to see it go back to the 7%. And I think there's a place somewhere in between that is fair to industry, fair to state government, if you will, and fair, quite frankly, to all taxpayers of this state.
Representative David Dank calls the 1% rate ludicrous, arguing the legislature is giving money away.
All these people out here claim to be conservatives. You cannot be a conservative and indiscriminately give away the taxpayers' money. That's a big part of what conservatism is.
Dank has proposed a compromise that would set the rate between 2 and 6%, depending on how many full-time workers each producer employs in Oklahoma. In her speech, the governor reiterated her support for a bond issue to pay for repairs to the state capitol.
And I put money towards a bond issue and payments in my executive budget. So I'm asking this legislature to pass a bond issue and to send it to my desk as soon as possible.
The House opposes the bond plan, arguing for a pay-as-you-go approach, but Senate leaders support the governor's idea.
And I think that is the only fiscally responsible thing to do. When you look at the historic low interest rates, if we truly are fiscally responsible, we will go out and bond that money and fix our capital, fully fund the Native American Cultural Center, and in my opinion also fund the OK Pops Museum in Tulsa.
Senate President Pro Tem Brian Bingman also supports a bond issue for the Capitol, but is less enthusiastic about using bonds for other projects.
I think it'll be very difficult to, put a bond for the Native American Cultural Center. The plan we had last year was, it would affect the general revenue, and in light of the $170 million shortfall we have, that's probably not a viable option.
While the Oklahoma Health Care Authority is seeking a $144 million increase in funding, the governor's budget calls for a cut of more than $47 million to the agency that administers the state's Medicaid system.
We cannot plunge this nation further into debt or place Oklahoma on a fiscally unsustainable path by expanding Medicaid. Both the President's plan and the alternative proposals that rely on federal dollars in the Affordable Health Care Act amount to the same dramatic growth in government spending.
House Minority Leader Scott Inman argues the refusal to expand Medicaid puts the state's most vulnerable citizens at risk.
Even though we've got hospitals on the brink of bankruptcy, we've got nearly 600 to 700,000 people in the state of Oklahoma without any health insurance, she says we can't accept those federal dollars for Medicaid, when she knows full well that the state already accepts $3 billion a year for that same Medicaid program.
While the governor's budget is the starting point for negotiations, it's the legislature that will have the final say on the health care safety net.
There are going to be discussions this session about Medicaid reform that involve the Health Care Authority, and I think that's where we're more interested, is having that conversation with the legislature about reforming this system.